If you're in the mental health industry and want to grow your impact, your reach, and your organization, you need to be at the Mental Health Marketing Conference. This October 7th through 9th, join hundreds of marketers, executives, and clinicians for 3 powerful days of inspiration, strategy, and networking. From AI to storytelling, from branding to market strategy, you'll leave with actionable ideas, meaningful connections, and access to industry experts. It's so much more than a conference, it's a community. Visit mhmarketing.org to learn more and grab your ticket today. Attend in person in Franklin, Tennessee, just south of Nashville, or attend online and see me as one of the keynotes. And use discount Joe to get an extra 10% off any ticket. Again, that's mhmarketing.org and use promo code Joe to get an extra 10% off any ticket. This is the Practice of the Practice podcast with Joe Sanok, session number 1242. I'm Joe Sanok, your host, and welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast. We have so many. I just elbowed my lamp. I'm going to leave that in. Elizabeth, our podcast editor, leave that in. I just elbowed my lamp trying to get more comfortable standing here. We are here, 3 to 5 days a week, talking about all sorts of different things. I get to follow my curiosity, and really, Josh, who's been setting up so many of these interviews in the last 6 months, has been finding just such amazing researchers and authors. Just recently, and I'm not sure what order they'll end up, putting these out on. But we talked to Harvard's Bob Bordone to talk about conflict resilience. We talked with Kelly McKenna about specifically marketing through Instagram. We talked about kind of relationship renovations and what that looks like. We talked to Time Magazine, who named Dr. Alan Roth Guardian of Healthcare during COVID. So, I'm just so impressed with my team. I get to hang out with these really cool people here on the show to help you build a thriving private practice that you absolutely love. We always want both sides of that. We want you to thrive. We want you to do well, but we want you to love it. We want you to be playful or to be able to help people in a way that you really want to help them. There's so many ways to make money. We want to make sure that the way that you do it is a way that you're enjoying, that you're entering into life both professionally and personally in ways that you get to show up in a way that you just absolutely love. Well, that's why I'm so excited today to have Nilanjana Dasgupta with us. Nilanjana is Provost Professor of Psychology and Founding Director of the Institute of Diversity Sciences at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. She is a leader in research on implicit bias, diversity science, and interventions to create positive culture change. Her passion is to translate science for social good. Her work's been featured in the New York Times, the Atlantic, Boston Globe, Scientific American Mind, and National Public Radio. Her new book is Change the Wallpaper: Transforming Cultural Patterns to Build More Just Communities, published by Yale University Press. Nilanjana, welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast.
Hi, Joe. I'm really excited to be here. I love your show, and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Oh, thank you so much. Even just talking with you before we started rolling, I'm like, this is going to be a great show. I wish we were in person. Just really similar postures towards the world. So really excited to have you today. Let's start with when you write a book, especially when you're a person that values science, you value just different ways of thinking about the world. There's so much that you have to edit out, or you have to include, or you have to maybe take the way you would talk about it to your scientific peers and adjust it for the general public. First, how did you enter into writing this book to preserve, the scientific integrity while also making it approachable for the average person?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I really felt it was important to be science driven and not to dumb down the evidence and to take my readers seriously and also be interesting. So for me, like that meant um, 3 tools: stories combined with evidence, so the science, so SNS, so science and stories, and metaphors. So Change the Wallpaper, the title of the book, is a metaphor for a concept that is key in social psychology, which is the power of the situation. The idea that oftentimes our thoughts and behavior is nudged in small ways that we are not aware of by situational forces around us that seem small, but they compound over time. So
Mm.
that concept I wanted to communicate to my readers. And I thought that I needed something that people would understand. So I thought wallpaper in a room that we walk into, that we notice initially, but that fades into the background, but that influences the aesthetics of the room, how we feel, how we interact with other people in the room, would be a perfect way to capture that idea. So I thought a combination of the evidence, the science, stories that would grab the heart, and metaphors that would allow people to enter into abstract concepts and relate to it and relate to it in a different way. So I sort of mushed those three things together into something that and then sort of danced around with it until it felt right, I guess.
Mm. I love that. It's interesting. The book Talk Like TED, Carmen Gallo looked at the top 200 TED Talks, most viewed TED Talks. And he found that 40% of their talk is story, 40% of it's science, and only 20% of it is like, here's the big takeaway for you guys to learn. And it almost every single one of those top 200 follow that. And it was interesting because then when I looked at the kind of nonfiction that I enjoy most. So like Malcolm Gladwell, Daniel Pink, like all these authors that
Mhm.
really like weave all these different stories together. It's interesting because it feels sometimes like a good improv sketch, or it feels like a Seinfeld episode where you have these things that are in very different parts, but then they all come together to make a point, even though they came from very different spots. As you talk about story and science and metaphors, I know for me when I wrote Thursday is the New Friday, like I would just kind of dump all of my ideas for the next chapter up onto a whiteboard, like to get myself off the computer to just kind of disrupt my brain a bit. And then I would let it sit there for a week till I was going to be working on that next chapter to just let it kind of mull over. Like, what was your process for, say you have a chapter on a certain topic and then you're gathering the science and the stories and the metaphors. Like, what did your process look like for starting to kind of construct the framework of how those chapters were going to flow?
Yeah, that's a that's a really intuitive process. So I think the first thing is I guess the skeleton of the whole book. So for that, I came up with some idea of. So I guess I'll answer your question a little bit indirectly. So for the big picture of the book, I came up with this idea of what is the wallpaper? What is the problem? What are the different elements of the wallpaper that create the inequalities, and that was the first part of the book. So every chapter was a part of the wallpaper that created the problem, and within each chapter was the science with its stories, and I wove those two things together like a tapestry. And the second part of the book was how do you change the wallpaper? So again, every chapter was taking one piece of the wallpaper and said, what's the evidence that you can change it? What's the science that you can actually change that? What are some stories that you can change it? And then again, I wove it into a tapestry. Now, within each chapter, I first sort of did a deep dive and um, did my lit review and found all of the research in some way that I could find broadly. And I should say that the research did not just come from psychology. And that was the most exciting thing for me because I read broadly from everything from health sciences to psychology, sociology, architecture, geography, city planning, economics, all kinds of stuff,
I love that. I
very
just want to
broadly.
pause real quick there because I love when authors do that, when they really pull from outside their field, because there's so much to be drawn when you start to merge those things together.
That's right. And I think that we are so specialized and sometimes so hyper specialized that we don't see the threads across our fields. And so, what was so exciting for me in writing this book is to pull myself out of my field and to ask the question: what other fields have and disciplines have done research on how situations exert powerful influences on our minds, on our health, on our human relationships, on our psyche, on our mental health? What are the impacts? So then, as I was doing it, as I was reading the stuff, it was pinging me into other research. So I did that for a while. And then when my brain would get really tired with the science part of it, I would just stop, put a pause, and then I would just let my mind float and do searches on stories. Now, this is where I'm just going to sort of tell you in this loose way how I did it. Some of the times I would look for stories on TED. So TED Talks, podcasts. I would do a lot of searches on podcasts. Um, Sometimes I would ask my friends and my students. I'm looking for stories about this kind of thing. Do you know people who've experienced this kind of thing in that kind of way? Sometimes, if it was based in my research area, I would contact my research participants and say that you were a participant in my study. I wonder, can I interview you about your experience and get their, if they said yes, I would get their informed consent to interview them and then include their interview as a story in my book. I did some of that in the book. And then some of the times I would just travel in my regular life with my antenna up. And then if something came along the way, which sometimes it did, that I would be having dinner or lunch with somebody, and somebody would say something that would make me think this is a great social network story. I would ask my niece or whoever would tell me that, can you introduce me to this person? And I would interview that, and that would end up in my book. So I would just sort of weave back and forth between doing like a regular, normative reading of the science. And then when my brain would get fried, I would look for stories online or look for stories in the world. And at some point of time, I would start writing the stuff in my notes. Um, and then I would create like little every morning. My process is my circadian rhythm is I know I am the most fresh in the morning. So I would sit down in the morning with my cup of coffee for the first 3 hours. So from 6:30 to about 10:30, I can do work for 3 hours in 3 hour chunks. I would read or write for 3 hours, and then I would break and then do other things, go to the gym, go to work, whatever. Um, and then I might come back to some reading, but I would not write anymore. And I did that essentially, I would try and do that at least 5 or 6 days a week. And that was sort of the big picture of my process.
Mm. Love that. Now, you started to talk a little bit about just some of the book, and I'd love to dig into the topic. You talked about the power of the situation, and at the time of this recording, it's obviously a couple months before we go live with this. Right now, our country, as we know it, is in quite a situation. And looking at kind of your expertise area, before we got going, I was talking about like what do you think we can do nationally versus locally. Would love for you to talk about kind of the power of the situation, how you frame that out, and where you see people being able to make changes in their community that can actually lead to having these more just communities.
Yes, thanks for asking that question. We are in a, a, a real big historical period in our country, where the political landscape is very uncertain. and institutions as we know it, public institutions, civic society as we know it, is feels very tenuous. And I think many people are asking, what now? um, what is what can I do or what can I not do? And lots of people are feeling powerless as individuals. Um, and what the questions that I didn't time the book like this, but in some ways this book has come out. It was published in January of 2025. It's come out at um, I guess you can say the best of times or the worst of times. I don't know. I mean, it has come out at a particular moment in history. And I think my answer to the people who ask me is that um, the most effective sphere of influence for individuals, for us um, who are ordinary people, who are not um, politicians, for us to have an impact if we want to create a just society, is to act in our local sphere, because that is the local place where we live and work, is the place where we have the biggest impact. So the sphere of influence is the local. And what this book provides is to say, here is the science driven approach to creating culture change in the local sphere. I can tell you the evidence of what works and what doesn't work. And what works is more of acting collectively with other people. What works less is acting alone. What works more is acting on issues that are about changing material things, like things related to education, like things related to health, like things related to income. Those are more important to issues to act on. Decision making, voice, that are more important than purely symbolic things. Um, what I can tell you is that have forming relationships with others that we know, and doing incremental small things to make change that compound over time, and understanding that change happens as a marathon, not a sprint, is another sort of um, another, not a talking point, another point that the evidence shows. So the book directs people to the power of situations as the key to making change through collective action, not individual action. So wallpaper is my metaphor for these powerful situational forces that are in the background. And these situational forces nudge our thoughts and behaviors in small ways. They compound over time in one of two directions. They either pull us apart from each other based on initial differences, increasing our unfamiliarity with each other, increasing mistrust and polarization, or these situational forces might push us together, increasing our familiarity with each other, increasing trust, increasing inclusion. These forces, these pull and push forces, are in the background, much like wallpaper. We are all affected by it. So the book shows us how to notice these forces, how to counteract the negative effects, and how to harness the positive ones. And that is the call to action and the hope for change. And the book is showing, once we see the positive ways to put them in action, let's use those to develop strategies to put them into action here in the local sphere. I want to say one more thing before passing it back to you, Joe, is that one of the pieces of evidence that I talk about in the book is that the way the research shows that it is not through diversity training or through providing people factual information that change happens. It is not facts that change behavior. It is more relationships and these environments that change how people interact with each other, through which behavior change happens. So if we really want to change behavior, we have to allow for people to mix with other people who are different from us.
Hmm. As a therapist, I can tell you from experience that having the right EHR is an absolute lifeline. I recommend using therapy notes. They make billing, scheduling, note taking, telehealth, and e prescribe incredibly easy. Best of all, they offer live telephone support that's available 7 days a week. You don't have to take my word for it. Do your own research and see for yourself. Therapy Notes is the #1 highest rated EHR system available today, with a 4.9 out of 5 stars on trustpilot.com and on Google. All you have to do is click the link below or type promo code Joe on their website over at therapynotes.com and receive a special 2-month trial absolutely free. Again, that's therapynotes.com and use promo code Joe on the website. If you're coming from another EHR, Therapy Notes will also import your demographic data quick and easy at no cost, so you can get started right away. Trust me, don't waste any more of your time and try Therapy Notes. Just use promo code Joe at checkout. I love that idea of like what are things that are pulling people apart and making them less familiar with each other or pushing people together and increasing trust. Are there practical examples or stories from your book or from your research that people can do in their own communities that push people together, build that trust, build that familiarity with people that maybe aren't like them? Like, what are some examples or stories that you can share with us?
Yeah. So one type of um, story that I talk about in the book that pull people together is like is our for example is working environments where you are where we are in an office building or in a place where there is an open floor plan where or there's a lounge where people have lunch together or a cafeteria where we are sitting together with other people or offices where this no matter who the boss is or who the administrative assistant is, your spaces, your cubicles or your offices are next door to each other. So you're interacting with each other and getting to know each other as humans, even when you're not in meetings. So I talk about a startup company in the book where the boss, the CEO of the company, is sitting shoulder to shoulder with his employees, and he gets to know their projects. They get to know him, and this company gets really high ratings, anonymous ratings every year. On Glassdoor, because the employees know their boss and employees give sort of unofficial feedback to their boss, which he takes into account. And they really genuinely feel like the boss knows them and cares about their feedback and shifts course. And I compared that to a different company, Bon Appetit magazine, the food magazine, which is very hierarchical, where the physical design of the office is that the C suite people are in the top floor of this midtown Manhattan building. And the test kitchen people who are designing the recipes and testing out the recipes are in a lower floor in a windowless space. And the C suite people have no relationship with, no interaction with the test kitchen people. Now that's a totally upstairs, downstairs, classic segregated office work environment. And so there's no casual interactions, no relationships with each other. So those are two very, very opposing environments. One where people have relationships regardless of their role and rank and job prestige, and another where the hierarchy is really magnified by the physical segregation. So that's a good sort of example of how the physical design of our workplace can either flatten and create human relationships or can magnify distance and magnify the hierarchy.
Mm, yeah. Now, I'm a single dad with 2 daughters that, I want them to be socially aware. I want them to, build trust with people and help push people together. They're tweens and preteens. What would you say as a parent I can be doing that will help kind of enact the things you talk about in your book?
Yeah, I'll give two examples. One is schools. I've been in my sort of living out my version, taking my own advice and living it out. I would say that a great place for social mixing and equalizer is public schools. Schools are a place where kids of all backgrounds, across social class, across uh, um, religion, race, ethnicity, all kinds of backgrounds, can interact, get to know each other, become friends, play sports, have hobbies, both inside the classroom, extracurriculars. So I would say in school, outside school, team athletics, I found through giving talks and presentations, a lot of people who have friendships, a lot of kids who have friendships with other people, other kids who are different from them, happens through three ways: through public schools, through team sports, through music, and through food. So, any of these four things, depending on what your kids' interests are, um, see if there are ways for them to interact with and become friends with other kids who are different from them. I think the key thing is to find something that your kids are interested in and to allow them to put them in a space where they get to be friends with other kids who have life circumstances that are different from them. It might be through their classes and regular school. It might be through their interests and hobbies. It might be through both. So that's one. The second idea that I've been playing a lot with is stories. So we've started this conversation with stories. So the second kind of wallpaper I talk about in the book is stories that create social reality, that provide explanations for why things are the way they are, why there is inequality. Is it deserved? Is it undeserved? Stories of the American dream, stories of the little engine that could, that tell us hard work always works and you can be successful if only you work hard. Whereas we know that that's not true. So the advice I guess I would give you as a dad of preteens is that if you can uh, put in front of your girls stories of people and communities that they don't otherwise encounter. There are stories of people who are not in their sphere, typically, of unfamiliar people, and create a sense of familiarity. Part of social mixing is to either be in spaces where you can directly interact with people and become friends with others who are different from us. But when that is not possible, another way is to watch shows, read fiction, travel, all of these ways to, through imagination or through shows, encounter through stories of people who are different from us so that they don't seem so alien to us. So we understand and empathize with their lives and their experiences. So I would say, see if you can find shows. There's so many shows and all these films that got Oscars in this last cycle that you think would open their eyes to the experiences of people who are different from um, the community in which you live or who are less familiar to them.
I love that. I love how organic it is. And, unfortunately, so much of this is, how things have been in the past. And I think that, technology and kind of the almost the curation of childhood for parents is one of those things that um, has really been lost where, playing in a neighborhood with just whatever kids are there. When I was a kid, it was like that's all you have. We're not going to set up
Yeah,
all these play dates
that's
and do these
right.
other things. But in the same way that it's like my kids have their own playlists on Spotify to hear the music they want to hear instead of just, for me, it was local radio. I only get to hear what they
Yeah,
choose. There's such a curation of childhood now that in some ways then forces us to just like have to be more intentional to break out of those silos.
I think that that's right. You know, like you, I also grew up just playing catch catch in the neighborhood, or listening to whatever was on radio. TV was not even so big, and reading. I grew up reading a lot. Yeah, it is more curated now. Um, but if it has to be curated, or if it is curated, yeah, I would say, curate a movie club, or curate a sort of something that you guys watch together and have a discussion group. Um, so I would say that it's not just the watching; it's the also watching and discussing. So in the book, in the end, in the epilogue, I have this call to action where I say, have a just like we have book clubs, have a movie club or a show club with you and some friends where you watch something and then you talk about it together. Because I think there is something in the discussing. I would, like I sometimes do it with our kids, our adult kids, like watch something together and then talk about it, because what they think as 20 something year olds and what I think and my husband thinks is totally different. There's a generational difference. And it's interesting. So yeah. But you're right. There's a lot more curation than when we were kids.
Mm-hmm. Well, the last question I always ask is, if every private practitioner in the world were listening right now, what would you want them to know?
I would say that for all of your listeners clients, and for all, I guess, my students as well, that change happens, that your listeners clients and my students, change happens locally. Change happens um, not through facts. Change happens through relationships, um, and change happens by in slow increments, through repeated actions, and in small bite-sized chunks. Um, so I guess change happens through collective action, through repeated action, um, and if we keep at it in small bits, we can move towards positive culture change. So
Mm,
I will leave your your listeners with, even in this time of uncertainty, I think there is hope in in relational action together.
mm. And if people want to follow your work, get your book, where should we send them?
You can send them to changethewallpaper.com. They can also find me on LinkedIn if they search under Nilanjana Dasgupta. They can also find me on Facebook, but the best place is LinkedIn and changethewallpaper.com.
Mm. So amazing the work you're doing. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you, Joe. Really appreciate it.
You know, it's interesting. Every winter, we host this event that we call Firefest. You know, just because we think it's silly, because there was that Firefest that was the big scam. But we have usually 3 or more solo stoves going and campfires in the dead of winter here in Michigan. It's usually a cold night. We order like $100 in pizzas. We just invite people, anyone. It's an open invite, and to just see different parts of my world all come together in our backyard around campfires. You know, kids and adults, and a friend of mine. It was his birthday, and he invited his whole trans community to come, and it was just this beautiful event of just people from the school, people that we knew, people who we didn't know, with an open invite to eat pizza and stand around a fire in freezing cold weather. And as I hear Nilanjana's talk about these small steps, I don't ask people's politics there. I don't get into debates with them about that. And not that it's not important with the people we know and trust to have discussions and to sort through things. But that idea that, strengthening the thread of the community in my community is valuable. I didn't think of that as social justice work or of work to expose my kids to different types of people, but it is. And I just love the ways of thinking about our workplace, thinking about our communities, and saying, like, where do we have some power here to shift things? So it's inspirational. It makes me not just want to read the book, but to take more action and to continue moving forward in creating the world that I want to see my kids or your kids or even just adults. It doesn't have to be for kids to be a part of. You know, we also couldn't do this show without amazing sponsors like Therapy Notes. Therapy Notes is the best electronic health records out there. They will help you switch over from your current EHR. They also give you 2 months for free or just money off if you use promo code Joe at checkout. They are phenomenal. They help with automated billing. It's going to make it easier to outsource your billing. So many reasons to switch to Therapy Notes. Just head on over to therapynotes.com, read about it, and at checkout, just use promo code Joe. Thank you so much for letting me into your ears and into your brain. Have a great day. I'll talk to you soon. Special thanks to the band Silence is Sexy for that intro music. And this podcast is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information in regard to the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, the producers, the publishers, or guests are rendering legal, accounting, clinical, or other professional information. If you want a professional, you should find one.